So please forgive my voice for this video. I'm getting over a bit of a flu at the moment, but I think the harsh reality is sort of kind of setting in for me at the moment that there's not really a lot going on in Discovery this season that feels final and feels like this is it for the crew, like this is the last time we're seeing a lot of these characters, because I can't help but get the feeling that almost every character moment we're seeing feels like it's just setting up for an expansion later on that we're just never going to get. Because absent characters such as Saru, Detmer, Ushkan have all been talked about at length by members of the fandom over the last few weeks. Now, I've not really been drawing attention to any of that in my reviews because I was like, yeah, the cast are just on a break, like, you know, let them have time off. But I don't know, what are we, 5 episodes or so in a row now in a short final season with a lot of the cast not present or very active in the story. Now similarly, I feel like Indira, Reno, and to a lesser degree Tilly aren't as active in this season as maybe they should be. This episode isn't really a good example because all 3 had their own side plot going on, and Tilly had a lot to do last episode. But I can't help but feeling like Michael, Rayner, Mal, Locke, Culber, Stamets, Book, they're the main characters this season, and all of them are getting much more to do than any of the rest of the cast. Now, there have been final seasons before that don't make use of a central character of the show. 2 major examples that come to mind for me are like the 100 with Belmy Blake in their final season, and then Fitz in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I think the difference here, though, is that this doesn't feel like it's setting up for the big final celebratory return of everyone in the way Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., for example, did. Whatever the newly filmed epilogue we've been hearing about is, that'll probably bring back Saru, Detmer, and Awushkan, but I'm thinking it might feel like this tacked-on forced ending than something that's kind of natural. I would at least hope that this season was going to include them more in the next few episodes no matter, but we'll see. Overall, though, this whole episode was super focused on the lore and the background of the Breen, and it was expanded on here in a way that it hasn't been in any on-screen depiction of Star Trek yet. We got this big deep dive into their primarchs and their warring factions and how things work for their emperors and their thrones, and I think this mostly worked really well, because the Breen they're fun as this big mysterious empire, but I don't think they would have worked as such a big villain of this season without a considerable knowledge drop on who they are, which it's good that they're doing that. Keeping them super ambiguous and unclear who they are and what their goals are would maybe make this season lesser, so I'm really appreciative that they're giving explanations to a lot of things here, just kind of making them feel like a more fleshed out species in general. Like they're bringing this real sense of a threat to the show at the moment, and especially in this episode I felt like the show was doing a really good job at making everything feel tense and serious. Like the show does enjoy heavily playing around with this more levity focused and lighthearted tone a lot of the time. Even sometimes during its giant stake moments it kind of digs into that sort of levity feeling a little bit too much. I think the show rightfully took a step back from that heavily in this episode, and it really worked. Now, a complaint I had earlier on in the season when we first got the visual reveal for the updated Breen was that I found them kind of boring and just like needlessly generic for, I guess, modern sci-fi standards. Honestly, in this episode, I don't know whether it was the lighting or whatever way they were shooting these costumes, but it just made the costumes pop and step out more. Like, I found them a lot more interesting and less generic in this episode for some reason. And I just want to shout out the lighting in this episode in general, because the whole time they have this giant orange space phenomena across from them, and that orange light and glow was shining throughout the cast, and it just made everything really visually cool and appealing. Like, I talk a lot about not loving how Discovery lights its bridges sometimes. It feels like the ship is continuously at red alert with that bridge lighting, but in general the rest of the show is always lit really well, and it feels like one of those few streaming shows that doesn't go overboard with making dark scenes just impossible to make out. Like, the show has a really good sort of look in terms of that sort of stuff, and I really appreciate that and respect that. Now, in connection with the Breen stuff this week, we got some information about who Locke really is, which that was interesting, although I don't know if I'm the only one who kind of liked the idea of just some general courier, mercenary, bounty hunter style characters being a big part of this season. Like, whole other wildcards or the players on the board that didn't have this giant mystery behind them maybe would have added some extra dynamics to the show that could make the overall season a little more unique. I get it though, Mal, Locke, they need to stand out. Making Locke an ancestor of the Emperor of Breen kind of does that, I guess. But also, it feels sort of contrived that the new characters are always part of this big mystery expanding, and they're actually playing a huge role in this mystery, where sometimes it's kind of just fun to have them be sort of nobodies, or you're just wrapped up in this new story and they're trying to get through it like everyone else. But But despite Locke getting some developments, there was actually slightly more of an impact in terms of what we found out about Rayner. Now, getting a full exposition dump on his background was really good, and how Kelleron was ruled by another Breen faction for years, and how he was a major fighter in his planet's uprising against the Breen or something like that. That was all really interesting and added a lot to his character. It was kind of clear based off of prior episodes that there was far more to his background than meets the eye, so that it didn't really come out of nowhere, but I thought they handled it really well in this episode. Now, one scene I wasn't a crazy fan of that sort of revolved around this was that roundtable discussion scene from the beginning of the episode. And earlier on in the season, when first learning about this progenitor stuff, we had a similar roundtable discussion where we had the president and Vance sort of talking against Michael and Rayner. Like, it was this big thing of conflicting and different viewpoints, and I thought the show did a really good job at making that feel like a real discussion. The show tried a similar thing this episode, where in a very similar discussion room, we had a bunch of characters, Rayner and Michael being included, discussing how to handle the Breen, with most people in the room advocating for diplomacy, while Rayner was taking a far more hardline stance and advocating more for not trusting the Breen. And yes, maybe he was getting a little bit too personal, and he was focusing too much on his own experience with the Breen than, I guess, the wider issues at hand here. But as a whole, I can't say I was too happy with the show's handling of this scene. It felt a little sloppy, and like the show knew what it believed to be the right choice, so they had to make sure Michael and the other characters shut Rayner down immediately. Because to me, Rayner was not being hostile or over the top in his discussion points here. He was giving his reasoning for why he didn't believe the Breen should be trusted. He was bringing up their genocides against other planets and other things, and he wasn't just able to talk and discuss this, because we pretty quickly get Michael acting, like Rayner just said, the most angry and worrying things in the room, when he was just trying to add a reason why they shouldn't do this. It felt like everyone had already made up their mind beforehand and that there was no reason to be a discussion at all. While we've seen seasons in the past where this clearly isn't the case, and that these roundtable discussions are meant to be far more for discussing the issue and allowing everyone to explain why they are for or why they are against said decision. For me, this scene felt like Rayner bringing up why he's against said decision was completely out of line to the other characters, which feels like a little bit of sloppy and inconsistent writing with how the show has portrayed these kind of scenes in the past. I don't know, to me it didn't feel like it worked in tandem with other scenes we've seen that are very similar. Now, by far the most exciting part of the episode to me was that really quick mention of the Badlands at the end, with a tease that we're going there next episode. There are few things that describe 90s Trek to me more than that VFX-ridden Badlands. Like, it just represents the look of the franchise at the time, and I'd be really excited to see a modern take on that place. The Badlands being a major focus of Deep Space Nine, as well as minor mentions and appearances in Next Generation and Voyager, the Badlands was in the DMZ between Cardassian and Federation space, where colonies from both species ended up on other sides of the borders, which meant the Maquis formed and they fought against their Cardassians for their homes. So the Badlands was this area of space where the Maquis would hide due to the complete unstableness and unpredictability in that area. And they'd attack Cardassian and Federation ships from there, that whole thing. This is also where the Caretaker in the Delta Quadrant would abduct some ships from, taking USS Voyager from there, Chakotay's ship the Valjean, and even a Cardassian Dreadnought weapon ship was taken from there. Now, other than this, we got some cool references to a Tau Ceti worm of some kind, a 7 of Lime's drink that Jet Reno makes, but a big revelation is that we got kind of a reveal of what the Progenitor's mystery might lead to, and it's that it might lead to a way to bring people back from the dead. This seems kind of whack. Like, they need to explain what the thing is here. Like, they need to describe this a little bit next episode, because I'm a little interested on what this means. Like, do you need just the body? Can the person be dead a certain amount of hours? Is it like a Fountain of Youth situation? Does it kind of just cure diseases? Like, what's going on here? Now, I will say, if this is just a case of somebody who just got shot and just bled out 5 minutes ago can be brought back to life, I struggle to see how this is a concept that would cause multiple different major alien species to abandon all research, scatter clues, and freak out about. I think the crazy theories about things like the Iconians are not coming through, but I do think there has to be slightly more to this than you can just reverse death. Because I think in the 32nd century, that might not be something that's as big of a deal. I don't know, we'll see. Maybe it's just not what I was expecting for the big mystery to lead to. But I don't know, like, off of straight reaction to it, I'm not sure if that's the reveal I think is solid for this. But anyway, this week's episode of Star Trek Discovery was definitely an episode of television that aired on Thursday, the 9th of May. That's for sure. We're almost done the season and the show, like we're almost there. I think so far the season peaked for me around the time skipping episode in episode 4. I don't think any of the last 3 have been nearly as solid as that one, which, I mean, that was such a Trek concept, it's hard to beat it. But I'm hoping the show really does pick up some major speed over the next few episodes, but we'll see. Anyway, have you seen this week's episode of Star Trek Discovery? Did you like it? If you did you hate it? Is it the worst episode you've ever seen in your life? Is it the best episode you've ever seen in your life? Make sure to let me know. Make sure to like and subscribe. That's a huge way to help out the channel, and also sharing it to somebody you think might like it would be a huge help as well. Thanks so much for watching, and have an amazing day.